Well, we all want our kids to grow up into strong, resilient and productive members of our communities and to be okay with who they are and ready to tackle anything that might come their way. But more and more studies worldwide suggest that mental health issues are on the rise in our kids. Beyond Blue reports that 1 in 14 young Australians, aged 4 to 17, experience anxiety disorder, and that was in 2015. With us to talk about the rise of anxiety in our children and what we can do about it is psychologist Claire Marsh. Claire, welcome. Thanks for joining us again. You've been here before. We really appreciate you coming in here. 1 in 14 kids aged 4 to 17. What is this? Is this genuinely on the rise, as they say?
Yeah, generally it is. And of those 14%, we see that 7% of those, so about half, are experiencing anxiety in general.
Yeah. Why? Why is it
rising?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are changes in our society. You know, we see that kids have to deal with a much more fast-paced track of life, and there are a lot more influences and expectations, especially now that we see globalisation and the internet coming into play. Children are getting a lot more information from around the world, and parents as well are putting greater expectations on them in terms of their schooling and performance.
So how would I pick if I have an anxious child?
It's a good question. I think what we see in an anxious child is a combination of different factors. So in order for us to recognise that, we see changes in behaviour, we see emotional responses, and as well we see changes in their thinking and the kind of
type
worries
of emotional responses do you mean? Like as in outbursts, or like what do you mean?
Or what kinds of behaviour too, yeah.
Certainly, yeah. The kind of emotional responses we see is more of a sensitivity. They might get more upset easily, and they're going to be seeking more reassurance from their parents and just lacking confidence in doing new things. And so behaviourally, we might see that they will cling to their parent, you know, they will go for that extra hug and seek reassurance. And it can even be interpreted sometimes as defiant behaviour, because a parent might see that they're refusing to do something new.
A lot of those things you were saying, we probably see in lots of children.
Yeah.
So when does it become a problem? When does parents need to take the next step?
Yeah.
That's right. When it becomes a problem is when it really interferes with their daily functioning, and we see that maybe their worry is becoming disproportionately higher than what it should be for their age, or disproportionate to the actual situation. And it might be stopping them from engaging in things that normally they should be able to do around that age, like going to school, you know, going to their sporting groups and generally enjoying life.
There's something I read about anxiety in adults. Sometimes it comes across as anger. Would that be the same for children as well?
Yes, very much so. Children can actually come across as irritable. And again, we see that in the avoidance of things and the refusal to do things. And so being triggered and having that fear can just simply make them restless and irritable.
So can anxiety have a genetic factor? Is it something that children can learn from parents, or something they can pick up from watching their parents?
All of those things, yeah. So there is a genetic predisposition, we know that a child can be more vulnerable to getting anxiety, but certainly it can come through in modelling and parenting styles and the way that the parent interacts with the child.
I've just been thinking about this, Claire, and just wondering if in some ways we as parents and our society is doing wrong by kids in terms of, I mean, first of all, we've got family breakdown is on the rise. We've got a lot of kids being put in childcare and separated from their parents, and you know, end up with anxiety, clinginess. And then you've got at school, it's all, you can't take your shoes off, you can't climb a tree, you might get hurt. You know, and there's society is fearful and afraid of someone's going to get sued, someone's going to, you know, and I think kids pick that up, you know, when they should be outside playing, you know, climbing trees,
and they've got the influence of social media, which is right in their face. Is that another contributing?
Yeah. And not connecting with other kids where they could be bonding and dealing with that stress.
Yeah, you're spot on. And these are all influencing factors as to why we're seeing that rise in anxiety. And you mentioned one thing there, which was, I guess, being more protective. And that's something that parents do in response to seeing their child being anxious. They might generally protect them from the thing that's triggering that fear. They will, you know, give their child a lot more reassurance, which we know that just reinforces it. It can actually increase the anxiety and maintain it.
But I guess the opposite extreme we've seen in previous generations, where it's like, man up, son, and you need to learn to swim, and just chuck you in the creek, and
in the deep end.
you know,
stoic style.
which promoted a lot of fear, a lot
When
of
I
anxiety.
came home from school as a child, it would be quiet and I have time just to relax and think about the day and disconnect from my friends and everything that was going on. But this generation doesn't seem to have that time to be doing that, just to disconnect and calm down. Do you think that has an effect?
Yes, that's part of it, that we have those pressures and that fast-paced life and we don't create that space. And what you were talking about there is authoritarian parenting, which is where we see high expectations and also really harsh responses and punishments and a low level of nurturance and warmth toward the child. And so it's that kind of approach of, oh, just you'll be right, just get out there, just get over it.
Toughen up.
And
So
we know that doesn't help.
We can't reassure them. We can't tell them to toughen up. What do we do?
I was going to say, it's all on us though, isn't it? It feels
Not
like...
necessarily. There are many other factors
Yeah.
involved in it, so we can't just necessarily narrow it down to the parent. You know, there are environmental factors and many other things going on, especially pressures in the school environment. But it's a good point, you know, what can parents do? And we're not just saying that, you know, they're stuck in a rock and a hard place, but there is a middle ground and it's called authoritative parenting style, which is different to the authoritarian style, where it's a mixture of limit setting, but also supporting the child and being warm and nurturing toward them, but encouraging them to face those fears and to give things a go and to potentially fail at things. And that way they learn that resilience, but they have that supportive base.